election from September, the Commission had a different position. They seemed to think that everything was fine. They seemed to feel that the legislative framework was sufficient. And I know that a lot of colleagues had different views. And so I think it's good that we're making this point, looking at the things from a user point of view as well. So someone who is organising user rights shouldn't have to go to each individual national office. I think this is the right approach, and I think it is important that we make it clear to the Commission that they need to make other proposals, and then impact assessment. That's something which has been mentioned by a number of colleagues, Mrs. Tikau and some other colleagues. I would agree entirely with that. I think this is just the start of the debate, and it's a very complex issue. It's being dealt with by a lot of committees in the Parliament, and so I think we really need to look at the issue from all angles, and I think that's important. So we do need to have an appropriate impact assessment. We need to look at the consequences of having a one-stop shop approach, whether or not we can have one body that will be responsible for clearing, or if we're going to have a greater harmonization at European level, that will have consequences, and there's also an impact on the structures that we'll need. And so I think we do need to have assessment of all of the possible consequences. In the legal committee, there is an own initiative report, and we are giving an opinion on that. And I think we can ensure that they include our considerations on this. Then on piracy as well, that is something that we've discussed a number of times. We haven't really made that much progress on how we tackle the issue, but I think it's important that it is included here in the opinion, and the reference to the observatory and the development of standard procedures and criteria. I think that is something that I would support as well. So thank you once again to the rapporteur, and I hope that there will be further support for the proposal and the amendments in the committee tomorrow. Thank you, colleague Rudy.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. À mon tour, je voudrais...
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to compliment Paul Rubig, our draftsman, in my turn. And I'm glad he's focused on the SMEs, because they do find it very difficult to defend their interests. I'll keep this very brief and just say that I'm somewhat disappointed with the Commission's document, because it's a very important issue, protecting our intellectual property rights. We are seeing property rights constantly under attack, and that applies particularly to intellectual property rights. And what they're talking about here is setting up a monitoring centre, an observatory. They're talking about a European counterfeiting observatory with some sort of administrative coordination set up. So I have to voice a certain degree of disappointment with that Commission document, because on such a topic as this, I couldn't help feeling it might have been somewhat more robust. And then in paragraph 4.3, maybe this is an issue with the French text. They're using the word, the expression, managing sales of counterfeit goods on the internet. That seems a very unfortunate wording to me. Surely we should be talking about fighting rather than managing these transactions in counterfeit goods, but that's just a point of detail.
Bedanke mich.
Thank you. Could I give the floor to the Commission? I believe it's Mr. Stančikas who's going to be making the presentation. No? Somebody else? Who's making the presentation for the Commission? Is there no one here? Okay. There's no one making comments on behalf of the Commission. Could I just check whether or not Paul Rubig wants to make comments, or whether or not we can conclude there?
Mich recht herzlich bedanken.
Yes, I would just like to thank everyone, particularly what the colleague Odie said, SMEs and the creative industry. Copyright is an important issue for them to continue their activities in the future, and I think for consumers it must give the right to have access to what these creative people have produced in their own language. And I think that there's an agreement right across the groups on that, and I'm grateful for that.
Merci.
Thank you.
Dieser Punkt erledigt.
That concludes this point for today, and then it will be concluded tomorrow. And then point 10, the Commission Green Paper on the management of bio-waste in the European Union. The rapporteur is Giles Chichester. You have the floor.
Something new by bio-waste.
Thank you, Chairman. And I have obviously wasted no time in getting here at the right time. This is to present the amendments to the report. I'd like to thank my shadows and the Secretariat for the work, skillful work put into forming some compromise amendments, and I hope that those will command widespread support. There remain one or two other items where perhaps we couldn't reach complete agreement, and therefore we'll have to put them to the vote. But I think we've come up with a good solution, and without going into great detail, I would say to colleagues that if I've disagreed with them, it's because I feel we should stick to the competence of this committee and deal with energy issues rather than straying into the area of discussing the hierarchy of waste. That's really for the Environment Committee to deal with and determine. And so I think that's the appropriate way of dealing with it. So I think, rather than me going on at great length, Chairman, that's all I need to say, and invite colleagues to make any comments or complaints that they may have, and then I'll respond. Thank you.
Also, gibt es Beschwerden? Oder?
Are there any complaints or comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would like to thank Mr. Chichester very much for the cooperation that he's offered with the shadows on this opinion. And I would agree that we have managed to come to some very helpful compromises on most points. I would also agree with him that I think this ITRE opinion should really concentrate on the energy aspects. And I have a general concern, which is that biofuel from bio-waste is perhaps not given the attention that it deserves. Because biofuel from bio-waste is very important in us meeting the 10% target for renewable energy in transport. And at the moment, there are certain aspects of the EU legislative framework that are not very helpful for getting biofuel from bio-waste. There's a mismatch between the Waste Framework Directive and the Renewable Energy Directive. And there's a bit of a mismatch with the recycling target because local authorities don't want to contract their bio-waste to biofuel facilities because they might not be able to count that as recycling. And my Amendment 24 seeks to address this. In fact, I would be even happier if we didn't need legislation for this, and I wonder if the Commission could clarify that biofuels from bio-waste can count towards recycling targets, because that would actually make life much easier for everybody. But otherwise, I would just like to thank Mr. Chichester for his work. Thank you.
Bedanke mich, Herr Enschow.
Thank you, Mr. Enschow.
Mulțumesc, domnule președinte. Țin să...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just say that I truly appreciate what the rapporteur did. It's quite a remarkable